Well, hey everybody, welcome back. Very rarely, just a few times in the near 14-year history of the channel, do I get to show a new manufacturer and do a product review on a new manufacturer. And today we've got the Class 1 Model Works manufacturer, new to the hobby. They have produced the TWF10. Now this is a 48-foot well car. It is especially built for the heavier containers, so we're going to take a look at what you get from this TWF10 well car and a whole lot of containers from Class 1 Model Works right now. Okay, a little different review format when it's a new manufacturer. We're going to do a 360 of the box. It's made to look like a crate, as you can see here. Okay, the first step is to open the little flap here. As you can see, there's a little peekaboo window type of thing here with the container in these well cars. And that's a Class 1 Model Works container. So not a prototypical container, but something, special to show off their brand. And you slide out and you get the model. I like simple packaging like this because when I run long unit trains, I want something I can easily remove from the package. So there is the well car, that's the intermediate paint, and I'll be going over all those differences here in just a moment. Now we also have several containers to look at, and just so I'm very clear, I don't want to mislead you guys, this is not a actual model container, this is a cardboard cutout, just an insert for the model of the TWF10. Now there are containers, and we'll open one of these up, but you probably don't need much of an imagination to know what an unboxing is going to look like on these containers. Okay, before we dive into deep detail, I need to show you the three different options for these cars. There's as delivered, intermediate, and late. So the as delivered, I know we're going to go out on a stretch here, was as these cars were delivered. But I'll tell you the era, 91 was when these cars were delivered, 1991. So there's no reflective striping. They call it conspicuity or conspicuity striping. I can't pronounce it ever right. But anyway, there's no striping. That was actually in the 90s, late 90s. And that is where you get the intermediate. But you'll see the TTX logo difference between these two and the late, which was 2005. So 91, 90s, and 2005 for this version in the back. And all of these actually ran together at different times, so you can run them together, but those are the eras you want to look for. And there's some different warning labeling, especially on the intermediate and the late. Well, as you've noticed, I have this car on its side because a lot of the detail is on the top, and I'm going to show you that detail. That's why I've got the felt down so we don't damage models. Minimum radius on these is actually tested to be 15 inches. That means it's going to run fine on your 18-inch curves and look even better on the larger layout curves. Again, three versions, 48-foot containers go in these cars. So as we start over to this side of the car, you can see the etched metal walkways on the car. Those are nicely done. There's no warping or anything. I expected to see some warping on the handrails where the crew access ladders are on the side, but there's nothing there. Now this is a single cast truck, basically type of car. So the truck is single cast on the real thing to help with the weight loading, and you've got like a shroud, kind of a skirting covering up most of that truck there, which is very unique on these cars. So in the middle, as we had it turned this way originally, you can see what's called the structural members or the beams, and those are really nicely replicated there. You can even see the little pin areas where those containers would sit down in the real thing. So you can see that divide there, as the model is cast metal, but that's a brass etching insert, I believe, on the bottom of the car. There's brake rigging and etch walkways. There's a good view of the brake rigging. So all that plumbing and air reservoirs to hold the air lines for the brakes and hold that pressure up. You got the do not hump warning on the end with the coupler cut levers and the metal couplers. There's a brake line hose that looks, man, very realistic. I know I'm zoomed in so far here that I keep going out of view, but that is the most realistic brake line hose I've seen on a model to date. So we're kind of jumping around here, but back to the trucks for just a second. On the real thing, there's leaf springs up above the trucks, and those you can see are modeled as well. At least it has the appearance that those are leaf springs above the truck, and that helps distribute the weight of the container. There's about, they said 20% in 2001 of the fleet was still out there of these, and then I've also seen where they're saying about 10 to 15 of these are still in service today on railroads. Now on this end with the IBC, you also have, if you just catch the angle just right, you see that triangle there? That's a triangle stiffener, and that's been modeled into this car, and that's on the real thing. That helps keep the metal from compromising and shifting. It's a stiffener, so it's pretty neat that they have kind of worked that into the mold, or whatever you want to call it, the tooling of this model. There's jacking pads and ring eyelets, and I can show you that on the other end and on this end. If you look right here, the ring eyelet is up top for lifting this car in real life, and the jacking pad is directly below it right there, along with all of that warning labeling. Now I'm going to zoom in really closely so you can see the warning labeling, and I do suggest that you view these videos in 1080p full screen or on your TV so you can see all these details. You see the reflective striping, which is not really reflective on the model, but it represents the reflective striping. The TTX Heritage logo with patch, which is pre-weathered coloration on the late model version here. There's just so much I could go into on this car. You see the load limits there on the side. Again, increased load limit for this car. And again, the skirting, the unique skirting for this car, which makes it look kind of like a lowrider car. All right, we're working our way back to the intermediate version. You can see the box beams here. You can see a little separation where you'd have two 20-foot containers instead of the 48. Just a lot of the detail on this is pretty amazing. Even they model on the ends here some of the support for the box beams, because that's going to hold your structural support of the car. And you can see even the little angular pieces that help hold that box beam nice and level and keep everything in the structure of the car correct. That was all modeled correctly. And just to elaborate a little further on this IBC box here, that's right here up by my thumb, this contains pins that would go on the containers, because what would happen before is they'd leave the pins in the bottom of the well car and punch through the bottom of the well car, so they started retrofitting these with these IBC boxes so you could store the pins, and you can even see the pins modeled in the box there. So I just wanted to explain that a little further. So again, close zoom in, you can see everything is legible. There's the TTX intermediate logo, and more warning labels and such. And all the markings, you've got the 40-foot hash marked off, the 48-foot, helps the crews line up and place those containers where they need to go. And then once again, jacking pad lift ring for either pulling the car up off the trucks, moving the car completely, or jacking it up. So here's a quick Vanna White of the intermediate version before we move on to the as delivered. All right, so the as delivered version, 1991-ish modelers, the 90s and on, can rejoice in this. This will be something they can model. I've covered about everything. There's more stiffeners, keeps the structural integrity of the well car. Just so much to mention just on this well car. I can't wait to see what comes out of this company next. But this is the as delivered version. So we cover basically 3 different versions that can cover modelers from the 90s all the way up till today. So I promise this is not a game of Jenga. This is just all the different 48-foot containers that are available. You got APL, this 48-foot container, Santa Fe, Norfolk Southern with the Triple Crown, Southern Pacific, UP, there's AML, Santa Fe, and we're going to put that aside because I want to show you something. Hercules, EMP, and again another APL version. Just so many different versions of these 48-foot containers. Now, this Santa Fe here in the front, I don't remember which brand it is. I want to say Athearn, but this is one of the first containers I had back in 2009 when I got into modeling. And you can see how far things have come with containers. And Class 1 Model Works is leading the way on these containers, just with all the detail, which I'm going to go over real quick. And then we're going to look back at the well cars, because this is kind of a 2-for-1 review. And I know I've taken a lot of your time so far. But the container features just 2 styles, for example, are available. Monon and Hyundai. They're dimensioned and detailed from actual measurements, I guess, from the prototype. And you got a 48-foot scale length, which is an 8-foot 6-inch scale width and a 9-foot 6-inch scale height. The scale is about 1/2 and 1/4 for rivet heads on the actual prototype, and it also includes spacing. It's accurate 3-inch and 1 1/4 inch exterior posts with 1-inch wings. You can see all these posts on here and how well they're done, and you can just see all the writing and detail. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see some of that as well. Now there's detailed molded door latching gear and hinges with door bumpers. So you can see those little bumpers there on the door. That helps protect the container. So there's lifting strengtheners in the upper channel. You can see those. These are painted dirty white to represent aging, and you can kind of see the difference between that really bright white of my old Santa Fe version that's years and years old. So the upper and lower side channels are painted in a galvanized color. It's a different color, which is also cool. So they supposedly fit Athearn and Walther's containers chassis as well. They've got that unique pin, which I can show you here. You can see that for stackability. And I believe this is Athearn, so we'll try that. And yeah, they do stack together and sit well together. Now obviously they're going to stack well with each other, I would hope, so we'll test that out real quick. They sit well with each other. Okay, so that was a quick look at the containers. So just real quick, the Monon road names are Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. There's American Presence Line, Equipment Management Pool, Southern Pacific, Norfolk Southern, Union Pacific, Transamerica Leasing, There's BNSF and the Hyundai road names, along with American President's Line, Equipment Management Pool, North American Container System, Hercules Transportation, Alaska Marine Lines, and Transamerica Leasing. So all of those containers are available from Class 1 Model Works. So we've burned a lot of your time so far, so you're going to have to trust me on this next part. The couplers all have good coupler height. Everything seems spot on there, which is the first time I've seen that in a while. I do see a little variation between the cars, but when I put them all on the KD coupler height gauge, it was pretty much dead on all three. The wheels are all within NMRA standards with your NMRA tool here, the standards gauge. So that turned out well, and they run very smoothly. These are not going to weigh down a train. There's no body wobble. They're going to be able to be added to a very long consist without dragging down your train. So these cars just glide beautifully along the rails. And we'll go over the containers real quick and how they fit. Not only Class 1, but I've got that original Athearn, so we'll take a look at that. Okay, so the original Athearn, we're going to slide in here. Question is, does it fit? And the answer is yes, it does. So it slides in nicely. I know I've had some problems with well cars in the past not fitting containers. This fits in nice and snug. A little bit of play left and right, but very, very little. Just enough, I think, to accommodate some variations from different manufacturers. And this being an Athearn, I believe, don't quote me on that, it's so old, but it fits just fine. Then, you know, I would hope, but we'll check, that the Class 1 Model Works fits. And I derailed the car, but it fits in the container. And the answer to that is yes as well. So I'm able to stack on an additional container for this. And it sits firmly. I don't think it's actually connecting to that other container, but it sits firmly. I could be wrong about that, but it's not going to go anywhere with the movement of the cars. As you see, they're holding together just fine, no body wobble left or right, so really well made car. Okay, so let's wrap the review up. I think this is a well executed model. Very bright future for Class 1 Model Works. I'm really excited to see what else they come up with, and this, I'm embarrassed to tell you, are the first of my actual 48-foot well cars for my collection of several thousand pieces of rolling stock. But this really makes me want to get into a 48-foot well car unit train, so I'll be looking for some of those. Just really good execution, great packaging, unique, thinking outside the box, because all the packaging's the same now, but they've got the window combo with the flap to pull out your actual car. There's not paperwork crammed in there that gets bunched up. I love it for being able to pull these out and run them very easily. Glides beautifully, executed well. I did come into this review with some bias. I knew a con immediately was going to be these step ladders and the grab irons on each side of them for the crew to access being bent, and they're just not, because I was used to so many well cars having that. Glide beautifully, NMRA compliant. The containers are beautiful. We talked about those. I did forget to mention the little placarding areas on these containers and a lot of the container detail, just because the essence of time. I can't even really find a con for these models, with the exception of it takes a couple seconds to get the containers in, because it's a little bit of a snug fit, but you don't want them wobbling around. So that's really not a con either. So I've come up empty. Maybe more discerning modelers can tell me what's wrong with these, but I'm not finding anything. And speaking of discerning modelers, the expertise level at Class 1 Model Works, Stephen Priest and the gang have more modeling experience in their pinky finger than I have in my 14 years of being in model railroading, as you can see by this terrible road here that I haven't finished off. But basically, they are very experienced, and you want those type of people making models for us, because even though I consider myself an intermediate modeler at best, you've got your discerning modelers that are going to be happy, your really picky ones, And then people that are beginners and intermediates are going to be happy as well because they're meeting everybody's needs. So with that said, I will leave you with a run by of these, just 3, because like I said, I have no 48-foot unit train, but we'll see you next time right here on the channel. Have a good one. Take care.